Now to the story that's shaming Britain, the ongoing scandal into grooming gangs, rape gangs. Sir Keir Starmer brushed off the need for a full public inquiry earlier today into these rape gangs as jumping on the bandwagon of the far right. But what do survivors and their families make of this astonishing allegation? We can now speak with our national reporter Charlie Peters, who's been pushing the envelope on this story all of last week and for 2 years before that. In fact, Charlie Peters, you have an exclusive interview with us, Charlie, an astonishing story, heartbreaking, infuriating, yet one that must be told. Tell us more.
Martin, at this moment there is a significant national conversation going on about this national scandal. As you say, this is a period of our history that shames the United Kingdom. But so much of the focus at the moment is on the politics. It's on the tittle-tattle, on the gossip between Reform, Elon Musk and Sir Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister. At GBNews, we want to put the survivors and their families at the heart of this national atrocity, of this story and of this campaign that they're fighting to get the recognition for what they endured. And it's in that light and of that approach that this channel has taken that earlier today we spoke with Marlon West, the father of a girl called Scarlett, abused by gangs over several years and has fought for also several years to get some justice. He told me today that he did not have confidence in the Labour government and he called on them to bring in a public national inquiry into the grooming gang scandal.
Marlon, tell us about your experience as a father tackling this kind of abuse.
From the moment that I realised this was happening, so it kind of started when Scarlett was 13, just about to turn 14. And I went to a number of departments in Tameside, obviously social services as well, flagging up my concerns, education. Nobody would listen to me. And very rapidly, that increased. She was going missing all the time, which was definitely one of the red flags for me, which was very much out of character. And the police wouldn't recognise it as grooming. They recognised it as Scarlett being a problematic child, to the point that I had to really, really push social services to put her into care. It's the hardest thing I've ever done in my life, because I couldn't keep her safe. And even when she went into care, so she went into care for 18 months on a full child protection order, they still wouldn't recognise that she was being groomed. Actually, in one meeting, the social worker told me I was a liar. Now, it was bad before she went into care. Once she became 16, she was out of care and back in the community. Still in the child protection, but I was the main carer. Then the grooming was tenfold at 16. And it's not just about grooming. So a lot of people talk about CSE, child sexual exploitation. You always get a criminal element to it because the groomers will use them children as a business. So it's not just about sex, it's about county lines. They all come as one. So one of my arguments is child exploitation, because it's both of them. Yeah. And this is what was happening.
What was happening to Scarlett around this time then when she was 16? What sort of abuse was she enduring?
A lot of the details I found out afterwards, but I kind of knew, because at this point she was going missing for weeks. What I found out afterwards was she was being trafficked. So she was being trafficked to Bury, Rochdale, Bradford. The last place, which is only just 2 years ago, she was trafficked to Rochdale. The groomers were using Airbnbs to move her around. Now, the police did do a sting operation and traced a mobile phone. And they raided this property. But unfortunately, again, not acknowledging the grooming, they actually arrested Scarlett for intent to supply Class A drug, because one of the groomers had a load of heroin and crack belongings.
So the horrible situation, you've got your daughter, she's stuck in this abusive cycle, but the police are going for her and not for the abusers.
Yes. So she was bailed for 12 weeks under GMP.
It's Greater Manchester Police.
Greater Manchester Police. Fortunately, at the end of it, they didn't charge her.
Now, have any of her abusers ever been convicted for any of this appalling suffering that she endured?
Not one has been prosecuted. The closest we have got was 3 individuals given a CALM, which is a child abduction warning notice. But then she turned 18, so it wasn't worth the paper it was wrote on.
The grooming gang scandal is back in national attention at the moment. People are talking about calls for a national public inquiry. Do you have faith in the current government's position just to call for some more local reports, like we've seen with Jess Phillips calling for a local review in Oldham?
Absolutely not. The independent inquiries are not worth the paper they're wrote on. I've been campaigning now for nearly 2 years for a national public inquiry. The reason why the independent inquiries are not particularly very helpful is they do the recommendations at the end and they're not enforceable. So even the ICSA, they've still not put the recommendations in place. And the other thing is, they just skim over it. They don't look, they don't dissect the cases.
The ICSA report covered 6 areas for grooming. Only one of them had previous reports. When you saw that as the father of a victim and a survivor in that appalling abuse, you must have felt that the ICSA report was just a whitewash, a sham.
It was just a whitewash. And the other thing with that is, a lot of it's about institutions. It's not about what we're campaigning about is street grooming, where young girls are being picked up literally off the streets, not by institutions or clubs. Street grooming, which is being ignored.
Do you feel as though the ethnic disparity between the predominantly Pakistani abusers and the predominantly white girl victims has meant that you found it harder to get justice for Scarlett?
Yeah, because everybody's feared of being stereotyped as either being extremely right-winged or racist. But this is factual information. It's not made-up information. But we're feared. I'm feared. You know, I'm a professional. I am very careful what I say.
Do you have confidence in Jess Phillips after she denied the Oldham request by the survivors for an inquiry?
I don't trust any of the Labour ministers now. I am so disappointed because their attitude was different before they came into power, and now I feel like I've had a lot of false promises. So no, I don't. I have no encouragement in any of the MPs.
Today, Sir Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister, said that we don't need a national public inquiry. We've had so many reviews already, he said. We won't leave any stone unturned. If there were a public inquiry, how much corruption and cover-up and, frankly, neglect of Britain's children do you think it would uncover?
I predict that there's going to be a lot of cover-ups. I can only talk in my case with Tameside Local Authority, and for them even now to deny that there's grooming going on in Tameside is unbelievable. Even with all the evidence, it's overwhelming evidence with Scarlett that she's been groomed. So if this is happening in my town, this is happening all over the country, for whatever reason that is.
If you could deliver a message now to Jess Phillips, Sir Keir Starmer, Yvette Cooper, all the other Labour ministers about the national grooming gang scandal, what would you say to them?
I've said this previously. I would beg them. I would get on my hands and knees and beg them to reconsider and to support myself and other families and survivors to open up a national public inquiry, because how many independent inquiries are we going to have? They're a waste of taxpayers' money.
Now, Marlon West is one of the bravest men I've ever met, making that bold public demand for a national public inquiry into this appalling grooming gang scandal. The GB News can also reveal this afternoon that Marlon West met with the Safeguarding Minister Jess Phillips in November, where he introduced to her his demand for a national public inquiry. However, in minutes that were sent to him later after the meeting, all references to a national public inquiry were removed, and instead there was talk of a national strategy. Now, Marlon says he's not opposed to a national strategy, but he's concerned that his demand for an inquiry was removed. You've heard his concerns about the ICSA report, about the so few towns that were looked into that. He now wants an aggressive national review to go into the some 50 different towns and cities that GB News has identified as having these grooming gangs operating in them. And finally, also, he wants justice for his daughter, Scarlett, abused for so many years by these gangs in Greater Manchester, like so many thousands of other girls across Britain.
Charlie Peters, some of the detail of what Scarlett had to endure, it's harrowing and it's heartbreaking in equal measure. She was drugged, she was raped, she was forcibly used, passed around like a piece of meat. She'd go missing. The police were told. The police turned up. They arrested her. At one point, did they not? Because she was passing on drugs. She was being given drugs. She was being drugged. She was being force-fed vodka in hotel rooms. She was picked up in car parks when she was 14 with a car full of grown men. The police did nothing. Here is a father. God knows how he's still alive. God knows how he's still soldiering on. As you said, one of the bravest men you'll ever meet. What does it say when the Prime Minister brushes all this away as being the copybook, the handbook of the far right? And what have other survivors been saying to you today, Charlie Peters? It just seems astonishing that the response from the Prime Minister's office has been so utterly tone deaf.
Well, I was in Tameside earlier this afternoon and this morning when Sir Keir Starmer gave his statements about the grooming gang scandal, when he refers to politicians jumping on the bandwagon sparked, he says, by the far right and their poison. I have to say, well, the messages being sent to me and the phone calls I had with survivors after that speech, I can't repeat them. I just can't. The language was so strong, to be brief, very strong. But some of what I can say is that they were very disgusted by the association of the far right with their cause. They saw it as a grave misstep from the Prime Minister to refer to the far right in this case. Because, of course, as we know, Martin, across the years, across decades, people feared taking action on this issue precisely because of that fear that they would be labelled extremist, racist, far right, you name it, Islamophobic, the whole works. That was one of the main drivers behind the cover-up culture and the silence and the conspiracy of murmuring that surrounded the grooming gang's atrocity. Now, when you were detailing what had happened to Scarlett there, Martin, I have to say it no longer shocks me, because I've spoken to so many survivors with stories just like Scarlett's. There are so many survivors from towns and cities across this country who've endured similar levels of appalling abuse, unspeakable abuse. Much of it we can't detail on television. It's so horrendous. The only term I can use to summarise it, and we've seen this term used in many court transcripts, is torture. That's what so many of these young girls were put through. But as it stands, there has never been a national inquiry into that torture. There has never been a full, aggressive review into all of the towns and cities where there are credible reports of that occurring. That is what political opposition to this Labour government are demanding, and that's what we're hearing, I think, from many survivors across the country today.
Charlie Peters, can I thank you for giving a voice to all these people, to the survivors, and can I thank you for giving a voice to Marlon West, an incredible man. As I said, I don't know if I could still be alive if that happened to my daughter. I honestly don't know what I would do. And I think a great many people watching this programme, probably Charlie Peters, agree. Thank you so much, Charlie. You're doing God's work, as ever. Thank you. Now, a government spokesperson from the Home Office issued the following statement. No child should ever suffer sexual abuse or exploitation, and it is paramount we do more to protect vulnerable children, which is why we are working at pace across government to drive forward real action to implement the recommendations of independent inquiry into child sexual abuse. The government is committed to working closely with survivors and expert groups like ACT on IICSA.